Labą dieną, mes vėl su Andrium siautėjam Facebook'e su mūsų video įrašais. Ir šiandien aš galiu pažadėti, kad tikrai bus labai ir labai įdomu, nes ir mums patiems labai įdomu. Mes turėsim pokalbininką, kurį taip pat pirmą kartą su juo susipažinom prieš pat video įrašą. Tai yra David Stulík iš Prahos, iš Čekijos. Diplomatas, politikos ekspertas, dirbantis Rusijos, Ukrainos, Gruzijos, Sakartvelo klausimais. Ir kodėl iš Prahos, kodėl su šiuo žmogum? Todėl, kad Čekijoje vyksta labai įdomus įvykiai. Įvykiai susiję ir su tuo, kad šią savaitę Europą minės 75 metų pergalės prieš nacistinę Vokietiją, tokį jubiliejų, ir ta proga Rusija, Kremlius Prahoje iš tikrųjų kelia audras. Apie tai mums papasakos Davidas, bet aš tik noriu priminti, arba tiem, kurie negirdėjo, pasakyti, kad balandžio pradžioj, kaip įtarė Rusijos saugumo tarnybos, žmogus su diplomatiniu pasu atvyko į Rusijos ambasadą iš Maskvos, kaip rašoma Čekijos laikraščiuose, su mirtinu nuodu, risinu. Spec tarnybos žinojo, kad taip gali būti, ir Prahos merui, taip pat 2 administratoriam Prahos regionų paskyrė apsaugą, ir taip visi galvoja, kad tai yra susiję būtent su tuo, kad tie žmonės galėjo būti net ir nunuodyti. Kodėl? Todėl, kad meras yra iniciatorius, kad būtų pavadinta aikštė priešais Rusijos ambasadą Boriso Nemcovo vardu. Tai vyko vasario mėnesį, o balandžio mėnesį buvo priimtas sprendimas nukelti iš vienos iš Prahos aikščių paminklą Ivanui Konevui, kuris pagal Rusijos tokį propagandinę legendą yra tas Prahos išvaduotojas. Tai aš čia dedu tašką. I will switch into English now, introduce a little bit in Lithuanian for our Lithuanian followers. And Andrius, now the floor is yours. You say some words why we invited our new friend to speak with our people.
Well, ačiū Rasa, labą dieną visiems. Thanks a lot to everybody. Good afternoon, David. Really pleasure to see you. Knowing that you have been for 12 years, working with EU embassy in Ukraine, I think that maybe we had a chance to meet somewhere in Kiev or somewhere else in Ukraine. Now, really, you have some kind of luck. Now, as we understand, you joined a very, very well-known think tank in Prague, European Value Center for Security. We know very well A.Kubiliaus, and now we are happy that you are together. That is one of the most powerful, I would say, think tanks, which is looking into what Moscow is doing and how to build security in Europe. And you again are in some kind of front line, really experiencing, huge Kremlin pressure and attack, because Czech Republic and Prague and leaders of Prague are really implementing the wish of Czech people, and that makes Kremlin very angry. So, without any longer introduction, David, can you tell us really factual situation? Because we read about what Rasa was speaking about reports of your security officials about possibilities that some Russian diplomats came into Prague recently, bringing some poison, ricin or whatever. And that makes really situation very much not only interesting, but dangerous and challenging.
Ačiū, labą dieną, Lietuva. So the whole story started more than a year ago when the local city district decided to remove the statue, the monument of Ivan Konev, the Marshal of the Red Army. And the argument was the following, that first of all, the monument that was erased there in 80s doesn't represent, let's say, any historic moment or something like that. And that the second thing was related to the activities of Marshal Konev, for example, in Hungary in 1956. So there was a decision of the democratically elected district councillors to remove this statue. And since then, there were many discussions. The story was shown also on the Russian TV. The local communists and other extremists, even the right-wing extremists, were gathering around this monument in order to protect it. So we have had some sort of a duck war, which lasted for more than 1 year. And there were also always the statements by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mrs. Zakharova made a couple of statements. The local Russian embassy intervened a couple of times. But then there was a kind of a period of silence. But now the city or the district mayor, Mr. Kolář, decided during the quarantine to remove this monument. So he was actually implementing the legal decision, again, made by democratically elected representatives of that district to remove this monument. So again, the whole story started to be kind of boiling. And what followed was already the fact that was mentioned by you. The Czech secret services recorded an arrival already during the quarantine to the Prague airport of a person with the intelligence background, but with the diplomatic passport, who arrived to Prague, and allegedly he had the poison with him. So right after that, the police and the services, intelligence services, secret services, evaluated the situation, and they came to the conclusion that there is a real danger to the life of the city mayor. But we also have two other local municipal politicians involved, and it's Mr. Hřib, who is the mayor of the whole Prague, who has been also actively advocating for removal of this monument. He also was behind the decision to remove a memorable plaque from the Prague City Council that was mentioning the liberation of the Prague by the Red Army. And also we had another mayor of a Prague district called Zaporizhzhia, Mr. Novotny, who has already been on Russian TV, who was on the 60 Minutes with Solovyov, so who's rather well known in Russia already, who had also initiated the installment of a new monument to the Russian General Vlasov and his Russian Liberation Army, so-called Vlasov's army. So that monument actually is going to be released today, because today we are marking the 75th anniversary of the start of the Prague uprisal. And that's why, for example, Vlasov soldiers played a crucial role. They came to Prague already on the 6th of May, so 3 days before the Red Army. And actually they were very, I would say, supportive of that Prague uprisal. So that's why also Mr. Novotny is now under police protection. The worst situation is with Mr. Kolář, because he is hidden in an unknown place, separated from his family, with no mobile connection, with no internet connection. So there is a real fear that something can happen to him. And, I think Rasa already mentioned it in Lithuanian, that there were even like 2 attacks on Czech diplomatic missions in Russia, on the embassy in Moscow and on the consulate general in St. Petersburg. And there was also an information that a number of Russian security officers from all over Europe were kind of moving to the Czech Republic. So the Czech authorities really evaluated the situation in that way, that there is a real threat to these 3 democratically elected representatives of municipal authorities, and they decided to start this protection.
So thank you so much. Interesting. And so could you evaluate now a little bit more on the reason why Russia is doing such attempts, trying to giving so high level how to say attacks, not only physical attacks, which possibly were found by your security services, but also information warfare, which we are following from Solovyov or other propaganda machine programs. So this is as I understand, this is a factual, I mean, battle on the ground about the history. What we are telling in our resolutions, when we are speaking about that in virtual areas, but here in Prague today is boots on the ground of these people. They are fighting against a free city.
Right. I would say there are a number of reasons. The first reason is this kind of ongoing battle of narratives with regard to the Second World War. This has been kind of an issue for Russians for some time already, and they have been always very anxious, looking all over Europe to find the so-called covert fascists, who are kind of questioning and putting a question mark and doubt on their interpretation of the Second World War. So here, the Czech Prague district, number 6, with its mayor, Mr. Kolář, were immediately labeled as fascists, as those who want to rewrite the history. So this kind of a battle of narratives is very important for Russian domestic audience. This is a kind of an attempt to show to Russians that Kremlin, the authorities, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, are defending the Russian interests all around the world, abroad, so that they are the only ones who are legitimate to claim to win against the fascist Germany, and those who were like General Vlasov, they were betrayers, and they were supposed to be executed, and they were executed. So they are traitors. So they were fighting on the side of fascists, and all of those who are questioning this Russian narrative in Europe are also to be kind of labeled as fascists. And I would say there is a second reason why now this situation is sort of escalated, and it's related to the COVID-19 situation in Russia. I mean, Russian leadership, Russian authorities, Russian state are facing huge health problems with regard to own population. So I think this is one of the attempts to kind of distract the attention of our ordinary Russians from these daily, let's say, problems with the health situation, and again to redirect it to these historical kind of battles. And since now we are around the date of the 9th of May, and for example, there will be no parade in Moscow. So the Russian authorities, Russian state want to show to own citizens that they are really defending, you know, this kind of a glorious heritage of the Soviet Union.
We saw attacks against Poland in December, before preparations before COVID-19. We saw preparations for 9th of May with huge attempts to advertise, I mean, rewriting history and so on and so on. We also were involved into that process because we introduced resolution in the European Parliament, and it was adopted, so resolution also was attacked. But my question is also I would like to ask about the attitude, about the reaction of the people in Prague or in Czech Republic. We know that there are different opinions regarding towards Russia, like your president. You have a different understanding on many things. So what is the situation? How it looks like in the society?
Here I would make another, let's say, introduction of the topic of the Prague Spring 1968. Because this year we also saw huge attempts from Russia to reinterpret again what was happening in our country during the Soviet occupation and invasion in August 68. So quite a lot of Russian state media were interpreting again this military intervention and occupation as the act of brotherhood. And even those Czechs who have, let's say, more kind of a empathetic relation to Russia and Mr. Putin, they were kind of surprised. Even our president, Mr. Zeman, kind of protested in Moscow against this new interpretation of 1968. So I would say that in general, most of the Czechs, and I think it's confirmed by the public opinion polls, are quite skeptical about this Russian interpretation of the history. And they are quite, I would say, disappointed and fed up with the way how Russia is interfering into our domestic affairs. I would say that, for example, like in Ukraine, the more Russia is pushing here in the Czech Republic, the more united we are, actually.
Putin likes to make enemies for himself.
Can I add one more general question?
Sure.
And since you are experienced diplomat, and now you joined really very important think tank, and so my question would be, what would be your idea about how we should behave in that battle of narratives? What should be our next next strategy? Because what we can see, we know our narrative, which we consider that this is a truthful narrative. Yes, it was good that the West, together with Soviet Union at the time, managed to win against Hitler. But for us, Second World War ended not in 1945, but in 1990s. Now, and that is why you suffered, Prague Spring, and crush of Prague Spring. We suffered our tragedies, after Second World War, deportations and military resistance in the forests and so on and so on. So that is our narrative. Putin is making narrative, that glorious victory, in Second World War belongs only to Russia of today. Even Ukrainians are denied, to show that, among those millions of soldiers who suffered, who were killed during Second World War on Soviet side, the millions were also from Ukraine. But Putin narrative is very simple, that is the only moment which, in some way, Russia or Moscow of today can be glorious. That is the victory in Second World War, because there are no other things which, unfortunately, Russia can be proud of. That is only one thing. But then there is the West, where still there is some kind of confusion. And when we're trying to explain our narrative, or we are trying to show that, look, there were two criminals, Hitler on one side, Stalin on another side, and a lot of victims. The question is even where the numbers of victims are larger, on which side. Still in the West, that is not a very, not a very acceptable way to receive the whole story of 20th century. So,
but Andrews, in resolution we mentioned that. In resolution,
of course,
it's very clear message.
But the resolution was good. But now we need to look how to win, this battle of narratives. First of all, in the western part of Europe. So, what would be your let's say ideas and your vision from that point of view?
In our think tank, we are devoting quite a lot of attention to these issues, because we deal with the issues of disinformation and fake news and other things. So we are kind of looking at the ways how to communicate these things. For example, these true historical narratives, and there are many of the ways how to do that. One is through the, let's say, discussions of historians. There are many great pieces of books on history of the Second World War. I myself will always suggest to everybody to read the Bloodlands of Timothy Snyder, for example, where it's perfectly clear that there were these two totalitarian empires clashing with each other and smashing everything that was in between. There is also a big role to be played by, let's say, the arts, the cinema industry, and at least here in the Czech Republic, even these days, there are many new movies shown and produced by the Czech public TV, movies that are related to these dark periods of the Second World War. And again, this is a kind of a popular way how to, for example, introduce these issues to a broader audience. My kids right now are watching a series, I think it's a German series, for children, which is called Me and the War. It was actually supported by the European Union through the media program. And it shows all the negative things of the war in a very kind of, I would say, still gentle and kind way for children, to show them how the war was terrible, and even how the Stalin and the Red Army was not always, such a kind of, let's say, the force of the light of power. So this is another thing, how these issues can be explained. The other very important thing are the personal contacts, different, let's say, conferences and interactions with people in the West, especially with the opinion makers, journalists, politicians. So there is a constant need to talk to our counterparts in these countries. And here, for example, quite recently, we have started similar discussions with our colleagues in Poland and partly also in Slovakia, that we should present this narrative all together, because it cannot be like that you have at least 10, 15 countries, Baltic states, Central Europe, countries in the south of Europe like Bulgaria, saying that the Russian narrative is actually a faked one, right? So it's the only one country in Europe that is pushing this very one-sided narrative. So we are trying to look into the ways how we could maybe join the forces with our colleagues from other institutes and institutions in other countries, and that we could promote this kind of a narrative together towards the audience in Western Europe.
Thank you so much, David. And I think that I can say thank you on behalf of the informal group in European Parliament, Remembrance Group, which was founded before current time. Unfortunately, we were not able to have any more meetings, but in the future, I think our cooperation will be very important one. And because in European Parliament we have platform to speak, platform to communicate. And of course, my last sentence is that utmost important thing is the truth. The only way to fight false narratives is the truth, to tell the truth. So what we are trying to do with you today and in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. And
thanks a lot
for your work.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.